Hey guys, welcome back to the YouTube channel run by SDBO. Today we're going to be talking about goodwill and intangibles, so let's dive in. As always, I am not a professional, nor is SDBO a professional organization, so always be seeking professional advice when you go out into the real world. That being said, let's talk about the basics and foundations of intangibles and goodwill. So an intangible asset is something that obviously is not physical. It's owned by a company and it brings value to that company. Okay, that can be something like an intellectual property, the rights of ownership, or what we're going to be talking about today, which is goodwill. So goodwill is not what you might think of when you think about goodwill. Goodwill is not the thrift store, right? Rather, a business term that helps explain the price that you pay for an asset that's not the equity of that asset. Okay? So what is equity? Equity is the value of an asset minus its debts on that asset. So let's say that you really wanted a Stanley water bottle. You don't have all the money to buy that $100 water bottle, right? So you borrow $50 that you're going to pay back. So the equity that you have in that Stanley water bottle is the value of the water bottle, $100, minus any debts that you owe on it, which is $50. Therefore, your equity in the water bottle is $50, right? The same can be applied to dental clinics. Let's say that the value of the clinic is $1 million and the seller still has $250,000 of liabilities and debts. That means that the equity that seller has is $750,000. So what does the goodwill actually represent? The goodwill is just the price tag on top of the equity price tag, right? So you're paying for something in addition. What is that something? That something is the benefits of the brand. So a business takes a lot of time and years to build, especially when you're talking about a service-based business, right? So dentistry, it specifically means that the patients have confidence in your ability to do dentistry. They like the work that you do and they appreciate going to your dental clinic, right? So what you're paying for in goodwill is the years of hard work that it took the previous dentist to build confidence in that patient pool. And that is a huge thing to buy into. When you're getting into practice ownership, one of the most beneficial things that you can have is people in the chair receiving dental treatment the day that you start. That's why you pay a big price tag to acquire a practice rather than doing a startup. Because if there's no goodwill in a practice, you're essentially just doing a startup to begin with. You're just buying equipment and seeking to build your patient pool. So the biggest portion of value that a seller can sell to the buyer is that goodwill and confidence in the business itself. But goodwill is not stable. It's not something that just constantly is stagnant, right? Think about if you have ever lost confidence in a business because of some kind of scandal or lawsuit that came out. Maybe it was an employee that was fired and they start telling you about all the dirty secrets behind the closed doors of that business. And therefore you stop going to that business because you've lost confidence, right? So you can lose goodwill overnight. That's something that is very easily lost, but it's not so easily gained. It takes years to build back that confidence. So anything that decreases the patient confidence in a practice destabilizes goodwill. Things that can decrease the stability of goodwill is a doctor that is selling their practice but is upset about the sale or doesn't like you that much as the buyer, right? It could also be an employee with a similar kind of situation. It also can be related to changing things in the practice really shortly after acquiring the practice. You'd be surprised at how many people get thrown off when they see a new face in their dental clinic. They're used to the same things. They don't like change. They already are a little nervous about going to the dentist. And then all of a sudden, the waiting room's changed, the front desk lady has changed, the music that's playing over the sound speakers is not the same that they used to have. And so all of these little things kind of build up and they start thinking, I don't want to come here anymore, right? So one of the things that's always suggested is when you acquire a practice, try to leave the patient experience the same, at least for a little bit of time, until they can build confidence in you as the new owner of that practice. A funny thing is that fee-for-service practices and small-town dentistry, their goodwill is actually less stable than that of city dentistry and non-fee-for-service practices. Now, they're still good industries to get into, but fee-for-service practices have less stable goodwill because the patients are paying out of pocket, and therefore they're a lot more conscious about the changes that go on in the practice. They also have the means to go and find a new practice to go to. They're not limited by their insurance. They're just limited by the amount of money that they can pay and their personal preference in dentist, right? Small town dentists, they suffer from always being watched, right? So they'll go to the grocery store or they'll go to their kid's baseball game, and there's people that know them and say, hey, that's my dentist. So you constantly have an eye watching over you in those smaller communities. That can be difficult if the patient loses confidence in you because, I don't know, you buy soy milk instead of cow milk, right? So, or something weird like that. I mean, there's an infinite amount of things that could destroy goodwill, and it's a good rule of thumb to make sure that your patients are just less aware of these changes that are occurring when you're making that transition through the acquisition process, right? If they're less aware of the changes, that means the goodwill is maintained and they feel like their experience is the exact same. So the interesting part about goodwill is that even though it's not a tangible asset, it's still a protectable asset, right? Because it's a real thing. You legally can protect yourself and safeguard the goodwill of a practice because you're trusting that that selling doctor is telling you the truth about the goodwill and success of the practice. It's done through the purchase agreement. These protections and contingencies that are included in the contract itself, that's what safeguards the goodwill that you are supposedly buying into, right? You not only can protect the goodwill, but it's an essential part of the acquisition process. You really need to make sure that it's included in there because you are very vulnerable when you are saying you are going to purchase somebody else's practice. It can protect you against falsified information. It can protect you against going bankrupt because of something else that a different dentist has done. It can protect your business adventures. And ultimately, it kind of just protects your name and your credibility as a dentist, right? Because that's not you who's performing the bad dentistry or the thing that lost patient consumer confidence, but it's still associated with you because you are a part of that practice after you've purchased it, right? So how do you protect yourself? You include some of these clauses and more that I've listed here at the bottom, right? A defective work clause is just something that says, well, the previous dentist did some kind of crappy work, it fell apart, and now they're going to need to cover the replacement of that part, right? Because you going in there and saying, you need to repeat the work that you just barely got done to a patient can destroy the goodwill or the confidence that patient has, right? Also, the selling doctor should sign a non-compete and a non-solicit. That means that when they're exiting the practice, they can't just go right across the street, open up a new practice, and tell all of their patients to come across the street to them. That protects you from losing all of the goodwill that was established. And then also the representations and warranties is basically just a small part of the contract that says, everything that the selling doctor is telling me, it's true, and they're not withholding any vital information that I would need to know to be able to make a purchase of this practice. These are all here to protect and safeguard the goodwill. So, in summary, goodwill is an intangible value of the practice. It's essentially is kind of like the patient confidence that they have in the practice. Goodwill is built over time, and it's really hard to build. You have to work really hard to get that trust, but it's very easily lost. You could lose it overnight. Therefore, goodwill should be protected, and you should make sure that when you're going into this new practice, that you have protected yourself against any kind of falsified information. So, that's it for today's lesson on goodwill. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope to see you in the next video.